I would like to ask the governor to say a few opening remarks. Welcome, Governor.
Thank you. Basically, what I want to do is just give you an overview of what we're trying to accomplish here, and then answer any questions that you might have. The state of Maine historically, or since the 60s, has been operating on three basic revenue sources. The state has two, and the municipalities have one. The overwhelming majority of the revenues come from the income tax, sales tax, and property taxes. In the income tax, there are 653,000 tax returns a year from Mainers that pay $1.2 billion. They pay the income tax in the state of Maine. What we are trying to do is eliminate that tax and put that $1.2 billion back into the economy, into people's pockets, and shift it to broaden the sales tax and increase it to 6.5%. And the reason that's important is there's 653,000 people visit Maine, that pay the income tax, but there's 29 million people who come to Maine in the course of 12 months. By broadening and increasing it a bit, and we still are going to be competitive, not only in New England but around the country with our sales tax. In fact, it's not even, I was asked today, why don't you make the lodging tax and food tax larger? There are reasons for that, and if you have questions about it, we can discuss it. So I'm trying to spread it to all the people that visit Maine. The other thing on property is we, the state of Maine, is the #1 state in America for second home ownership. Many of those people are people from out of the state that come in and spend 3 months here. Some spend 6 months less a day, and they're residents of other states. On an annual basis, we lose about $12 million in hard assets. In other words, people move out of Maine, claim residency in another state, and take all their assets with them. If you look at that's $120 million a decade, and in the last 25 years, it's like $300 million that's left Maine. So they earn their living here, and then they leave and go retire somewhere else, and I think it's about time that we keep them here. There are safeguards for the elderly in the bill. There are 2 safeguards. One is you double the homestead exemption for folks above 65, and then the second safeguard is you're never going to pay more than 6% of your fixed income towards property taxes. So that's the second safeguard. For people who pay sales tax, they get a sales tax credit. So Mainers are really not going to be hampered with the higher cost. It is really clearly designed to try to enhance our visitors to the state of Maine on an annual basis and have them share more in the distributions, such as 9 other states, which one of them happens to be just south of us. And the 9 states that don't have an income tax are far more prosperous than the state of Maine. So with that, I will open it up and you can start asking questions if you'd like.
All right, we will begin tonight with Brianna. Please forgive me if I get your names, if I mispronounce them. I apologize in advance. Krupski. Brianna? Okay, great.
All right, well, thanks for doing this. I'm a teacher, so I really appreciate having the opportunity to be up here and do that. So I'm curious, I like the idea, but I know some of the students in my class, they're curious to see how it's going to impact their local towns and possibly school districts. So I'm curious to see what would you, I guess, have for expectations or advice to local towns or cities as far as, I guess, some concerns are that if we cut income tax, people are going to jack property taxes, and residents are going to feel that could then impact funding for schools and such like that. So.
Well, let me start by giving you just one quick example. Since we're in Westbrook, I'll use Westbrook. What we're trying to accomplish. First of all, I would be lying to you to say that I'm not looking to get more sales tax. And I would also be, it would not be fair to say that we're looking for more property tax. But this is the, if you look at Westbrook, right now, the city of Westbrook is going to get this year $1,046,000 in revenue sharing from the state. This year alone, if the bill passes for the next, starting next year, 16, the immediate tax break is $4.6 million to the residents of the city of Westbrook. And once it's fully implemented, it'll be $14,769,000 versus $1 million. So it's $14 back into the economy with possibly a $1 going back to the city. That's really what we're talking about. As far as education goes, Maine as a state is an outlier. Maine is a state that is unfortunate that it doesn't want to address its problem. But Maine has 127 superintendents in the state of Maine. We have 180,000 kids. That's roughly about 1,300 students. The average high school in America is 1,500 students. So until we address that, I don't have an answer for you. I know that it shouldn't have an impact because I believe that we waste so much money in education that I believe the union bosses who collect the union dues and superintendents who ask for the money are the two big winners. And the big losers in the state of Maine are our teachers and our students.
All right, next question, Joyce Vayu.
I'm Joyce Vayu from the commander of the American Legion Post in Freeport. I have a question about the veterans exemption for property tax. As it's written today, it is only for individuals who are on active duty during certain periods. I've had 20 years of experience working with the Guard and the Reserves. I'd like to see that expanded. So if a soldier puts in 20 years as a citizen soldier in the National Guard or the Reserves, they also qualify for that exemption. Thank you.
Okay. What we are doing for the veterans immediately is take all income tax off their pensions. So that whatever military pensions they have, they will be exempt from all income tax. For property tax, what we are doing is, as I said, is geared more towards people 65 or older who are on fixed incomes. And this particular program, while I understand we'd like to have them all exempt from property taxes, we got to decide whether or not we want to deal with, I can only deal with the income tax and the sales tax. Property tax is a local issue, and frankly, I always get accused of interfering, and I try not to, as much as I can. So I will say that from the property tax rate, we didn't deal with it because it varies so much. From 11 mils, actually from single digits to like 8 mils to 29 mils. So there's such a disparity. And so that if you took away property tax, you would significantly affect, I think there you would directly affect the homeowners and the communities far more than we are doing with this particular program.
Corey, I'm taking a stab at this. We're out.
Governor LePage, is it truly your intention to tax nonprofit agencies? And how do you respond to those who claim it is unethical to do so?
Well, it's being done already in many states. the ethical part of it. But let me tell you this. I will go back a few years, and I see there's a few people here my age, so they'll understand what I'm talking about. Back in the 50s, nonprofits received their funds through the communities and through contributions from local citizens. I am going to put $1.2 billion back into the pockets of Maine people. The 653,000 tax returns, they're not going to be paying income tax. And there's going to be all that money available for nonprofits to go and look for donations. And I maintain that the good nonprofits who do good for the community are recognized, and there's going to be a flood of money going to them. So the property tax, I was looking today, this year the $62,500,000 in property tax and revenue sharing. And I already looked at, in our proposal, we're giving back $20 million, right off the bat. We're giving back the telecommunications, and we're giving back the exemptions on housing. We're putting back in about $12 million. So if there are other ways, I'm all in. Let me tell you, University of Vermont in Montpelier pays the town of Montpelier $2 million a year. Now, I think that's high. I don't think we need to do that. But I do believe, strongly believe, that many of the nonprofits in the state of Maine are users of our services, police, fire, emergency, and I think that everybody who makes a living off the state resources ought to be contributing.
Governor, if I could also add to that, the concept of asking nonprofits to contribute at the local level for the cost of services is not a new idea. In fact, in the governor's budget briefing document, he references that many of the service center communities, larger communities like Westbrook and South Portland, and this region, have often come to the legislature and asked for other means to generate revenue, because plow trucks have to go by those large nonprofits, fire and EMS calls, police calls, that there is a service impact. And because payments in lieu of taxes or pilots, as you may read about, are really not widespread in Maine, and where they are used, it's really inconsistent. So the tool that the governor has put in this budget allows every municipality, puts them in a position to generate some of those revenues from large nonprofits. That's not revenue that comes to the state. That's a tool local communities have long asked for. So it does make it interesting that folks that point at the governor and say, you know, you're going after nonprofits, that there are impacts. That the University of Vermont example, the University of Vermont knows that if Burlington's going to thrive, they need to make sure they have the kind of services that allow that to happen. We don't see that from the Bates, Bowdoin, and Colby's, given the level of impact that they have. So if there are other ideas, if communities and nonprofits have other strategies where they can contribute for their impacts, the governor has said he's open to those ideas, but right now those costs are being shifted to Maine property owners, and we need to make sure everyone pays their fair share.
Yeah, it's basically this. We try to put $1 billion back into the economy, and we know that it's hard to take $1 billion and put it back in people's pocket and expect everything's going to run without that $1 billion. So you've got to find sources to increase the revenues. We do believe right now, for instance, the state cap, LD1 in 2005 was a state cap on property taxes. And more money went into education, and there was supposed to be property tax relief. A handful of cities and towns in the state, and I think you can count them, maybe you need 2 hands, but I think it's more like 1, really reduced property taxes. Most of the communities said, well, that will prevent us from having to increase. The bottom line is, in 2005, the general fund monies from the state of Maine before LD1 was 37%. Today, this budget we're putting through, general fund money going to communities, 37%. Hasn't changed. The states is 13% below the state cap of LD1 at $471 million. We're spending less than the cap by $471 million. 1/3 of every community in the state of Maine is above the cap every year. So over the last 10 years, since 2005, at least 1/3 of the state, of the towns, have been over the cap. And it changes every year, but so what I'm saying is, some communities, there's some years that 70% of the communities are over the cap. It clearly doesn't work the way that way. So what I'm suggesting is this. The best government is the one that's closest to the people. Therefore, let's put the towns and make sure that they have the resources, the ability to raise the monies that they need at the local level. Let them make the decision, not the people at the state and not the people in Washington. Because there's never any good that comes out of it. I'll give you an example. I just got a letter today from the United States Department of Education. We applied for a waiver on education on No Child Left Behind because it doesn't work in rural states. We've known that for a long time. Finally gave us a waiver. Last year in the legislature, we had to establish some assessments for our schools and our children in our schools. The legislature said there would not be any student testing in the teacher assessments. So now the federal government says, can't do that. We're going to remove your waiver if you don't fix it. That's the problem that we have to deal with. Now, people in Washington know that one size does not fit all. We've been crying about No Child Left Behind since I was mayor of Waterville back in 2003. And it never worked then, it's never going to work because it was specifically designed for inner cities, large inner cities. So that's the problem with keeping government too far away from the people. And the other thing, the more practical thing is, when you're a mayor, you can't get away with anything. But when you're a legislature, nobody sees what you're doing because you're in a group. The only one that's not in a group is the governor. He can't get away with anything. Anyone else?
Thank you, Governor. Julia Bergeron. Where are you from, Julia?
I'm here from Portland. How do you plan to make sure that the low-income families who really need the refundable sales tax credit in this budget proposal know about it and claim it on their taxes?
Well, immediately after this budget passes, it's going to be on their tax return. Now, first thing you need to understand, the first phase here is to reduce the income tax of 5.75. The intent is over the next 5 years to get it to zero. Every single year when they file a tax return, it's going to be part of that tax return. It's going to be clearly there. It's going to be based on income, and whatever your income is going to give you a refund or a tax credit against the income tax that you're paying. The property taxes, the homestead exemption is going to be automatic for over 65, and you're also going to be held to 6%, which is going to be taken care of by the state. Now, so that you understand, we're going to be putting in $34 million the first year, $60 million the second year, and $90 million going forward to the homestead exemption, another $30 million for tax credits and sales tax. So there's $120 million that's going to be going to give, not revenue sharing to the towns, but a direct tax rebate to the property tax owners, the property taxpayers. So rather than dealing through the towns, because we know that doesn't work, it's proven. Every property tax relief bill that's been brought in the last 20 years has failed. But if you give it directly to the individual who owns the property, then they can choose to negotiate with the town at town meetings and city council meetings on how they want to be taxed, and they have a say. Very few people in the state have the ability or the time to come to Augusta every day and testify when bills are going to be taken up. And when they're taken up, they put a time limit on it, and there's only a handful of people that can speak. So that's what we're trying to do, is get government closer to the people.
And also, Julie, a number of components of this tax proposal are really looking to protect Mainers of really limited or modest means. While there may be a limit to how much the state can do trying to reach every individual tax filer, there are a number of organizations, and you may know in Portland, that help as volunteers prepare their taxes. So I think the extent to which communication and awareness raising happens, the sales tax fairness credit as well as the property tax fairness credit, which is also available to renters, making sure that those volunteers on the ground that are engaged are aware of that will be an important piece. So it's not just the state government's role. There are so many community organizations that help folks file taxes, making sure they're aware and can speak to people so that will be important.
I know we have some local town and city officials here with us tonight. We've got a question from one coming up, but do we have any legislators here tonight? Please stand if you're a legislator so you can be recognized. Great. Thank you for coming tonight. Peter Crichton, he's the Cumberland County Manager. Where are you? I'm a former reporter, so you can't take the mic.
All right. Governor, thank you for being here, first of all. I am Peter Creighton. I'm the county manager for Cumberland County Government. And my question is, will you provide transitional costs for counties to be able to provide regional services to municipalities? We've done a lot of work in that area over the years.
And the answer to that question is I have asked the legislature every single year since I have been your governor to provide me with $5 million for the education system and $5 million a year with the municipalities and counties to allow us to go out and for work that's being done to lower the cost overall. And the biggest thing that I'm concerned about is when you talk about communities joining, let's say, the fire departments and the police departments and the emergency rescue departments and public works, you're usually dealing with organized labor. And if there are multiple municipalities, there's multiple contracts. The contracts all have differences. And so you've got to consolidate that in. And clearly, you're not going to take the lowest paid contract because nobody's going to buy that. So you've got to take the highest paid contract on benefits and wages. There's an upfront cost. And the answer to your question is, annually, I would like to have a pot of money for both municipalities and education to help that process, but the legislature has said no to me 4 consecutive years. I've asked again this year, and I'm hoping that they understand what we're trying to do here is to not to have a slush fund, but to put RFPs out to counties, to municipalities, and say, if you have ideas of programs where you can lower the cost of operation over the long haul, answer this RFP, we'll sit with you, we'll rank them, and then that's how we'll spend the upfront money. I think it's a great way to get Maine to be more competitive nationally. And the reason I prefer this way, we have tried the consolidation of jails, and we've tried the consolidation of schools, and from the top down, and it doesn't work. Forcing people to do things they don't want to do doesn't work. There are too many RSUs that are busting up, and if you haven't heard, there's a whole lot of problems in the county jails. And the biggest problem is there is no incentive. There's just no incentive. You were just told you're going to do it, and that's it. I'm trying to reverse that and say, let's find ways to do it.
Devin Grayson Wallace? You would have to be way over there, wouldn't you? All right, I'll get my exercise.
First, I want to thank you for taking the time to be here. It makes it much more convenient than, as you said, us having to go elsewhere to speak to you. My question is, does your new budget proposal include any incentives for businesses and individuals to use more renewable energy produced here in Maine?
Not in the budget, because the energy issue is an issue that's controlled by the PUC. But I will say this, the renewable energy produced in Maine are being sold out of state, and for good reason, because they're very expensive. For instance, the wind and the solar contracts that are in Maine being sold in Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, are in the 15 to 21 cent range. We have the one with the tidal project's 31 cents. So that's the produce. That's not delivered. That's producing. So what we need to do is we need to change our model. And we have some bills in, and we've had them in for 4 years, and they keep being rejected. The answer is we have proposals, but they're not being accepted. Give you an example, though. We have made progress without the legislature. In 2010, when I was elected, when I took office in 2011, 82% of the homes in Maine were heated and water. Today, it's 60%. We have had 10,000 homes in the state of Maine that have shifted from oil to heat pumps. Now, if you don't know the system, heat pumps are enormously efficient. They run off electricity, and the Blaine House, we have cut the heating costs of the Blaine House, or the energy cost of the Blaine, I should say heating cost, the energy cost, by 75%. And it provides air conditioning in the summer. So, well, I should say something. 2 weeks we have hot weather. You have air conditioning. But the answer is there are technologies, and we're trying very, very hard to convert. The biggest single thing that would help Maine and Maine businesses is to increase the natural gas capacity. We have natural gas, we have the pipelines in the ground, the infrastructure, there's $300 million have been spent. But we do not have enough gas to satisfy our industrial base. And that's why the paper mills in Millinocket, in Old Town, and recently Bucksport came across some very, very difficult times. Is because the cost of natural gas in the winter, like for Bucksport, the increase, not the usage of natural gas, but the increase between November and May, the delta was $20 million. That's how big a number it is for the paper industry. So they are desperately in need of natural gas, and it's far less, it's more efficient and far less, the emissions are far less, it's much cleaner than oil, let's put it that way. I think that's the right way to do it. Now, heat pumps are even more efficient than that. And there are even more efficient ways. For instance, we could buy right now nuclear from Seabrook at a very, very low price, but nobody wants to have nuclear power. Whether we're right or wrong, this is the way I feel about it. You've got Point LaPro in New Brunswick, you've got Seabrook in New Hampshire, and we're in the middle. And we're not buying the cheap power. So if anything happens, we're exposed no matter what. So you might as well be getting cheap power if you're going to be exposed, because it's there.
Energy is certainly one of the top priorities of the governor's, but one of the perks of my job is to keep them on track once in a while. So we're going to get back to the budget, and I need Shirley Rosen. There you go. Shirley? You were one of the first people here. Hi, Shirley. Where are you from? Portland?
New York City,
I hear that accent.
but it was 1956, so I spent all of my life in Maine. But my question is, it's reported that those earning $175,000 would be less than people in the middle class, those making 36 to 50,000 annually. How does this help the average Mainer?
Okay. Number one, the article is wrong. It's simply wrong. You don't start paying income tax until you make $50,000. 50,000, 75,000, you go in increments. Nobody will be paying more than 5.75. Nobody. If you take the taxes and it goes up to 6.5, it's only on the incremental piece. You get the first 50,000. So at 175,000 and beyond, they'll pay 5.75 for anything else they make. But the marginal rate increases to 6.5, but the effective rate, because you have a piece that you don't pay anything on, you won't pay over 5.75. Now, that's one thing. The other thing to keep in mind, in 25 years ago, Maine had in the vicinity of 2,500 millionaires in the state of Maine. And New Hampshire had about 1,000. Today, Maine has 400. And New Hampshire has about pushing 5,000. There's a multiple of reasons why that happens. But it's not that there's a law in Maine that says you can't be a millionaire. The problem is this: when you are a millionaire in Maine, you leave. And I'm trying to keep them here.
A fact that might be important to keep in mind, before this tax cut proposal that's in the governor's budget, those making over, say, $90,000 a year paid about 58% of the total income tax revenue to the state. That percentage actually increases. So those making over $90,000 a year are actually paying a larger share of its total state income tax as part of this package. So people can get into discussions around what that bubble bracket looks like, I guess is the buzzword. But the key here is that those at the highest brackets are actually going to be paying more of the total state income tax after the proposal than before it.
It's because you get that 50% more on the front end, you don't pay for the first 50,000. It's zero. But if you make $1 million and you pay 5.75% above $50,000, you're paying a lot more money than the person that gets zero, and then he goes to 5.75 and then 6.5, and then you do the marginal rate and you come down to 5.75. But we can argue all about that, and we can say we can change that. That's available to be changed. But this one thing that's a fact, and I bet you that everyone in this room knows somebody that lives in Maine less than 6 months on a day because they don't want to pay the death tax and they don't want to pay the high income tax. And they go to states like Florida, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Arizona, Texas. These are all non-profit, non-income tax states. And people can say, oh, the weather's better and all that. That's fine. And I don't begrudge anyone going to Florida in January and February. Or maybe even March. I do condemn them for going in December because we should all have Christmas with snow. But that's only 3 months out of 12. And we're losing them for 6 months in a day. 6 months in a day. And what do we lose? We lose the hard assets, and we lose their intellectual knowledge. Now, we lose $12 million a year. If $12 million a year leaves the state because they don't want to be taxed, I maintain those people we ought to go after, because if they make $12 million, we want them here. We don't want them in Florida. Because when they go to Florida, their money, all their contributions and everything goes to nonprofits in Florida, not in Maine. And they're the ones that are more apt to make contributions. So I believe that we should try to keep our elderly, particularly the prosperous elderly, here in Maine. And I think we'd be much better off because it's been proven time and again. If you look at states that don't have an income tax and look at their level of prosperity, you will find that they're much Their per capita income is significantly higher than Maine's.
Great,
New
thank you.
Hampshire, Connecticut, New Hampshire is $10,000 more than Maine on a per capita basis. We earn, as a state, as a full state right now, we earn 80% of the national average per capita income. 80%. What I'm trying to do is get it to 100, or maybe even 110 if we're lucky.
Jennifer Burberg.
Well, your selection is pretty hard. You're going back.
You're killing.
I'm going to start asking you to meet me halfway.
Where are you from?
I'm originally I was born in Philadelphia, but I lived abroad for a very long time.
Where do you live now?
I live in South Portland, but I lived in Ireland for a very, very long time. So I'm looking at the whole tax thing from a whole sort of different perspective. And pardon me if a question sounds a bit pedestrian. I sort of put down about a sale. Had you ever thought about like a value-added tax, a VAT, or a flat tax kind of thing? But the other thing that I saw, that I was sort of listening and reading, was the corporate tax. I worked for an American company whose US headquarters is in Andover, Mass. Am I allowed to say the name? But anyway, I worked in their Irish branch at Shannon Airport, the Shannon tax-free zone. The corporate tax, we had, when Shannon, within the airport.
It's a good airport.
Yeah, it's a good airport. Lots of US soldiers would come, and they'd come to Ennis and
It's the airport that
say no
trains
more
most
of that.
pilots.
But the tax-free zone, I mean, Dell was in Limerick. We had all these US companies that came because there was no corporate tax on the Taoiseach, Bernie Ahern at the time, lowered the tax. So it's like double fold. You get businesses coming in for a tax-free zone. Is there any way to do that and utilize the airport from a global perspective? And just trying to get to Philly to visit family from here is ridiculous, price-wise. And it might help do more competition.
Okay.
So,
Basically, what she's asking is, can we make a tax-free zone? I attempted to do that with this legislature. I'm sorry, the previous legislature. We tried to make Brunswick, Naval Air Station, because it's got the longest runway on the East Coast, a corporate tax-free zone. I attempted to make Loring Air Force Base, which is the longest runway on the East Coast, an international tax-free zone. And they voted it down. And I can only present it, and they voted it down. Now, if we had, you are absolutely correct. What I'm doing the corporate tax, we're at 8.93, which we're one of the highest in the nation. We're 45th in the nation. I'm going to lower it to 6.75, I believe. It's 6.75. There's so many numbers in my head, I try to remember. But we're lowering the rate, and we're going to go from 45th to 17. So now we're not only competitive in New England, we're going to be competitive nationally. But you're absolutely right. Airbus, Boeing, and these large corporations go where they get a big incentive. And all we were saying was, if a company comes to Maine and will invest $15 million and hire 1,000 people, we'll make them a tax-free, corporate tax-free zone. And it gets voted down. Well, how much did that get us for corporate taxation? 0. I'll give you another example. The film industry. The film industry works like this. They'll come in and they will invest a ton of money in your communities and they'll make a movie. The last one I remember was Paul Newman and Ed Harris in Empire Falls in Waterville. I happened to be there when they did that. A ton of money. They came in and they took a local bar and they dressed it up and they rebuilt it. And then when they left, they gave the bar back to the owner, and the owner said, I have to bring it back to the old way because I lost all my customers. That's another story. But the point is this. A movie industry will come into your community and say, we'll invest $50 million, but you give us 25% break on the taxes. or 50% break on the taxes. You'll refund us the taxes we pay. Sounds, I think it's a good deal. Because the alternative is, Stephen King's last movie was filmed in South Carolina. He wanted to make it in Maine, but we wouldn't give him anything. So he went to South Carolina and got a 50% tax refund. So we are willing to settle for zero, while South Carolina was willing to settle for 50 cents on a dollar. That's the problem with the legislature and how we've been operating the last 25 years. We need to be competitive. We need to be competitive. Now, I'll give you an idea of what I mean by that. Airbus, who is moving from Europe to Alabama, is going to invest $600 million in Alabama. And they could have come to Brunswick and invested $250 million for the same thing. And this is what they told me. The incentives Alabama is giving us will make it back in 3 years. With Maine, it would take us 10 years. That's what I mean about being competitive. Now, do you know what the starting rate is? The all-in rate for a jet assembly technician? The hourly rate is $48, and the all-in cost or rate to the employee is $75. The rest is benefits. It's big business, and we could have got several hundred people working there. But we need to think outside the box. We need to be willing to say, hey, we don't have to have the whole pie, because I only need my size, I only need a small piece.
David Lebec.
Good evening. I'm David Lebec from Newcastle, and I have a law practice in Danvers, Scotland. I'm also the Maine State Bar resident, and I'm here with some other attorneys tonight, and we just wanted to express our concern of your proposed tax on legal services, and that functionally it will hurt people who are already down. And for example, people seeking legal services for criminal issues, divorce, bankruptcy, or maybe pursuing protection from abuse from a domestic partner, all suffer under this proposed tax. And we're wondering if you'd be willing to reconsider that tax, given the effect it would have on...
I could. If the people of Maine do not want, if the people of Maine want to keep the income tax, we certainly can do that. So how many would rather keep the income tax? How many would rather get rid of the income tax?
Maria Crow.
You have spoken.
Maria? Going once?
You know, the one thing to answer this question, though, there's another thing that you're forgetting in the equation. I do understand that the people that go for legal services will pay 6.5% on the services that they have to pay for. But they will be going into that process with $1.2 billion more in the economy that has a 4-to-1 multiplier impact, which really helps the overall economy, which actually will be the highest rate increase that we have had in 60 years. It's the largest pay raise that any Maine will ever have. Thank you.
Dennis Eisherwood? Thank you.
Hi. Welcome to Westbrook, Governor. I'm very proud to have you as our governor.
Thank you.
What little I've seen of this plan, it really puts senior citizens at the bottom, it looks like. And we're the ones that have been paying the bills all these years. And I think it's time for us to get a little bit better deal on the tax.
You know, it's funny because we got an economist that did this report for the Maine State Chamber, and today I was on 207, and they're saying to me, your tax proposal seems to favor the elderly over most people. And this is what they're saying. You're giving them property tax relief, you're giving them sales tax relief, and you're giving them income tax relief. Whereas the middle income is only getting the income tax relief. And the other thing we're doing is we're taking away the death tax, which means that people will not have to sell their assets in order to hand down their businesses to their children. So I think if you really study it, you'll find that it really is intended and is designed to try to bring people back to Maine rather than away from Maine. And the maximum that anybody would pay for property would be held to 6% of the fixed income. So if you're on a pension and Social Security, whatever that is, 6% of that number is the maximum you ever pay for property tax. In many cases, we've looked at some now, in many cases that will lower the property taxes for some people in the elderly categories. So I really think that there's a lot there for the elderly. We just need to flesh it out, make sure people truly understand.
Patricia Yulin? Should have stayed up there. And hopefully you all have received a booklet. We have put those together for you. There's lots of information in there, some about how this does benefit our seniors. So before you leave, if you haven't received one of those booklets, let us know. We'll try to get one to you. If you don't have one, it is online, and that's at the governor's website, which is, we can give you that address if you need it, but it's Office of the Governor. Okay.
Thank you for being here, Governor LePage. You have mentioned that you wanted to look at out-of-state residents that have second homes in the state of Maine as a possible way for to increase revenue. And I'm just wondering, is that exclusive to out-of-state residents, or are you also looking at Mainers also that may have camps or vacation homes that would be impacted by that as well?
Basically, what we're trying to say is that there's so many people that have left Maine, they were Maine residents and left Maine, still have property here, and they've left because they've protected all their other assets as a resident, let's say of Florida or New Hampshire, or Tennessee, or states without income tax. And what we're saying is, if they're going to enjoy Maine in the best months of the year, then I don't have any shame in saying they should pay a little bit more property tax, because they really earned their living here, and now they're taking their assets away from Maine when we need them like everybody else. So, and we're also, the other thing I haven't mentioned is that in the summer months between May 31st and Labor Day, Maine is one of the wealthiest states in America. We have some of the highest wage earners, that top 1% who live here in Maine, and they pay property tax and maybe a little bit of sales tax, but they don't pay anything else.
And if I might add, something to keep in context, so that the governor's reference to those with the second homes, and I think the number's around 16% of the homes in Maine are second homes, and certainly there are Mainers who have old family hunting camps or places on lakes or ponds or otherwise, but generally in the structure of the tax reform package, the governor wants to find ways to ensure that those who visit Maine, who are from outside of Maine, contribute a larger percentage to helping support the state and the operations of the state. And the expansion of the sales tax to 6.5% and focusing on the meals and lodging components of that are a key piece. One of the reasons the prepared meals actually goes from 8 to 6.5% is because that's actually paid often more by Mainers than it is by out-of-staters. So to give Mainers a chance to pay less on those prepared meals. But the real opportunity with the tax reform, second homes being a piece of that, but more broadly, is that we have a lot of folks who come from away, and let's ask them to contribute a larger percentage to operate the state.
Thank you. Janice Ronan? Janice.
Out here.
Hi, Janice. Where are you from?
I live in Gorham. Thank you for coming tonight. I'm a Mainer living with cancer, and I have a health kind of related question. How do you propose that taking $10 million from programs like Healthy Maine Partnership, Maine's tobacco program, how can that help our youth from ever taking up smoking? Or how can that help reduce the cost to taxpayers and the state for tobacco-related illnesses, which costs us quite a bit, when it's been shown that public health incentives like that, or public health programs like that, actually help to reduce smoking for our youth?
In 20 years, it's reduced by 11%, and we spent hundreds of millions of dollars. So my point is, I would rather see that money go into, instead of building, making posters for schools and stuff, I think we ought to be teaching and talking about it. I agree with that. But the money should be going to helping those in cessation programs rather than posters. And that's all we're doing there. We're saying that the highest and best use is to help people like yourself rather than a 17-year-old that, frankly, should be also being discussed with the parents should be involved in that discussion, not just the state.
Some of this money is transferred to primary care and better
it's all
accessibility.
primary care, and if it goes to primary care, that's where the primary care physicians are the ones that should have the tools to work with people that want to smoke. Not so much, what we're doing is we're doing programs that everybody's telling us they don't work. It's the poster programs and the media campaigns. We're spending millions of dollars, and we're having such a small impact on the kids starting to smoke. Peer pressure is far more successful than any media campaign government can put on. Kids will listen to their friends much quicker than they'll listen to the state. So what we're trying to do is get that money, instead of in a media campaign, get it into the hands of the primary care physicians. The other thing that we're trying to do is in the primary care environment, we keep the doctors and hospitals saying we cannot find adequate number of doctors for Maine. My point is, why don't we educate our own and make our own doctors for Maine kids? And if they go to school in Maine and become a doctor in Maine and they're from Maine, there's a real good chance we'll keep them in Maine.
All right, well, everybody, it's been just about an hour, so we'll take one more question. And I'd like to thank you for your time tonight. We know you all have busy schedules. And like I said, it's been about an hour, but we will take one more. Ronnie Ray, where are you? Where are you from, Ronnie?
Ronnie Ray, the commander of Medical League Post 135 SAS. Governor, thanks for being the governor. You already answered my first question, taxing on profits over my back. Deep down, do you expect this to really pass? And if so, how much fluff from the Democrats do you expect to be added to it?
I guess I didn't get the second part of the question.
How much fluff from the Democrats? How much are they going to try to put in? Let little butterflies fly and things like that.
Okay, so let me tell you what I think is going to happen. The reason I believe it's going to pass is if the people of Maine want it. I'm going around talking to Mainers, and believe me, I don't mind working hard to get this passed and eliminate the income tax. But if Mainers don't want it as a population, then we don't need to do it. How are we going to prevent it from coming back in the future? It's a constitutional amendment that's being developed right now that is going to say this. The income tax is going to be reduced 5.75, and all real growth in the state revenues go against the income tax before all new spending can develop. We need to eliminate the income tax. Folks, in closing, I will say this. The state of South Carolina does not have an income tax. They are a very industrious state. They claim to have 40 million people visit their state every year, that they're very proud of their tourist industry. They have 40 million people over the course of 12 months. The state of Maine, between May and September, gets 26 million people visiting. What I maintain is we work a little harder in our tourism and we attract people the other 9 months, and we don't need an income tax. And without having an income tax, the 653,000 tax returns that come to the state and give the state $1.2 billion will stay in the pockets of Mainers, and they will be more prosperous, and I think the state overall will be more prosperous. So, do I believe it'll pass? I hope so, because I'm willing to put the energy into helping to make it pass. I do believe that some Democrats and some Republicans will be against it. I'm hoping that more Democrats and more Republicans are for it. And then we'll see. And if they say no, then we know. You like the high taxes. Then some of us will have to consider where we retire.
Governor, thank you. Director Labate, thank you very much.